welcome back to my channel, episode 3, array and list. Have you ever wondered how to store multiple items or values in one variable without creating separate variable for each item? For example, you have an API that will return you hundreds of items, or for example, a dynamic collection of user input. That's where array and list come in. In this video, we are gonna to break down the learning the C# collection in a very simple way and very practical way. If you are learning C#, this video will help you to feel more confident about the collection in C#. Let's get started. Okay, why we need collection? Before we start coding, let's understand what problem array and list solve. Okay, suppose you have a program that you want to store your student score in a program. For example, something like the int score. For example, score 1 is 90. Score 2, for example, is 80. It's so okay for some value, for example, 2 or 3. But if you have, for example, 100 of items, it would be messy and it would be hard to manage and hard to scale your data. Okay, in the situation like this, we are using collection. Store multiple items in one variable. In C#, we have two types of collection that they are so common and they are useful: array and list. At first, they are the same, but they behave differently. It's so important that you understand the difference between array and list. Okay, at first we are talking about the array. Array is a fixed size of the same time. It's so important. Fixed size of the same time. It means if you want to define an array, you have to do something like this. First of all, you have to say what data type you want to use for your array and give a name, employee, for example. Here you have to say new int, and here in this bracket you have to define the length of your array. For example, I say 3 items. With 3, we are saying to CLR, hey, I'm creating, this line say us that we are creating an array with 3 items. But how we can give the item to this or put the item in this array? Array have some special item, index that's so important. If you want to access an item in an array, you have to use index. But something is so important, the arrays are zero-based. What does it mean? It means the first index has the first element. The index 1 is the second element. For example, suppose at first I wanted to give some value to my array. For example, employee, I say the name of my array and open a bracket. And here I say 0. It means the first element. The index 0 means the first element. I give the value of 25. And the second one, for example, 35, the 0, 1. It means the second element. And 2 means the third element. Okay. Here I'm saying that I have a array with 3 items. And how you can print or access the item with index. For example, I say something like this: employee 0, for example, index 1. What does it mean? Index 1 means the second element, this item. Okay, if I print, you will get that the 35 in the output. Okay, but it's so important that how you can, for example, initialize your array. It's so important. For example, something like this. I have an array like this, for example, scores, and here I say, hey, I want to define an array, something like this, and here you say I want to give the value 25, 35, 45. Here I define an array with 3 items and initialize it. It's so important. But that's so important that you know, if you want to access the index that does not exist in your for example in your array. For example, I say something like this: score, for example, index 3. The index 0, index 1, index 2, index 0 doesn't exist. What will happen? Why I don't get any error? For example, if I press F5, here I get an error. What's the type of this error? It's a runtime error. We have 2 types of error in C#: compile time error, runtime error. Compile time means that the CLR will get that do you have any, for example, mis-syntax or a wrong syntax of, for example, array or everything in C#. For example, here everything is okay and now I'm accessing the item, but runtime is something different. For example, when I run my program, it say, hey, there is no index, and the index with 3. That's here that I get a runtime error. Okay. There are some special important method in array. For example, you can sort your array. first of all, you have to access array class and say sort and scores. For example, here, let me change, for example, something like this, that they don't be sort, for example, and here, for example, something like that. And here, if I want to print my array, I say for each, and here, if you print your item in the output, you will have a sorted array. You will have a sorted array in a ascending or descending. Here we have an in ascending way, but if you need in a descending way, here you say array dot reverse scores. Here, if you press a 5, it's say in a descending way. Okay, but what's the problem with the array? Why we need list? Here, the array, I told you that is in a fixed size. Okay, but lists have a dynamic size. In array, you have to have the same type, but in list you can have different type. Here, when you are saying I have an array of type int, it means that you have to put all of your items, all of your 3 items in an int variable, int item. It's so important. Okay, now let's get started about the list in C#. Now let's talk about the list. If you want to define a list in C#, you have to do something like this. First of all, you have to define your, here I'm saying that I want to use a list of type int, and here we shouldn't define a length for my list because it's a dynamic size. It's not a fixed size. Here, if you want to add item to your list, you have to do something like this: list.add. Add is a special method in list collection that you can add item to your list. For example, you can do something like this. And if you want to print your item, you can use for each, for example. Array and list for printing data, they use for each. Here, well, what are the other method of list? For example, I have another method that is so important. It's add range, list.add range. What's the difference between add, for example, I say list2. What's the difference between list add method and list add range method? Here I say list2, for example, here list2, and here for initialize the list, you can do something like this. Here I say 20, 10, 20, 30, 40. Here I'm saying, hey, in my list 1, I suppose list 1, for list 1, add, for example, 40, 140, and 142. And here I'm saying, hey, add range, add a collection of data to my list. Okay, it's so important. For example, here, I don't want to do it each item, for example, item 1, item 2, item 3. Here I'm saying, hey, use add range method. Add range method help you to add a list on an array of item to your list. Okay, if I print, you will get all of the item in list 2. It's so important. 10, 20, 30, 40 at the last position of your list. But what's the other method of a list? The other method, for example, you can use list 1 remove. What's the remove method? Remove, for example, I say it will remove the first occurrence of this item in my list. For example, I'm saying, hey, looking for the item with the value 10. If you find it, the first occurrence of this item in my list, remove it. But the other method is this one, that remove at. What does the remove at? The remove at uses an index. For example, I'm saying, hey, remove the item in index, for example, 2. That's the difference between remove at and remove. Remove at use index, but remove use the first occurrence of this value in my list. The other item is, for example, remove all. Remove all, what does the remove all? Remove all, for example, you can do something like this. Okay, remove all will get a condition or for example, item that and will remove all of the item. For example, I'm saying, I'm using lambda expression, for example, C, for example, division by, for example, 2 is equal to. It will find all of the item that this condition is true for them and will remove all of them. Okay. The other item for list is, for example, you can use insert. Insert. What does insert? Insert, what's the difference between insert and add? It's so important. Add will add an item to the last position of your list, but insert will give you will get of you, for example, one index and one value, and you can put your item in every position that you want. For example, I'm saying, hey, in index 3 add item, for example, 74. Okay, it's simple. That's the insert method, the difference between insert and add. The other method that are so important is first or first default. What's the difference between first or first default? For example, in first, you have to say one condition. Okay, for example, here I'm saying something like this. If there is no item that if we divide it by 2, it will get the 0. If we have any item, you will get an exception error. But first or first default, it will return you, for example, it will return you a null value, not an exception. It's so important. In my opinion, that use first or default, because in situation that you, for example, you don't know, or you don't pay attention to your code, and if your condition doesn't exist in your list or in your collection, it will return you a null. What does it mean? For example, if it's a null, for example, it's an integer, it will return you 0. If it's boolean, it will return you false. If it's a string, it will return you, for example, an empty string. Okay, it was everything that everything, all of your information about the list and array in C#. Let me summarize this episode. Array has the fixed size of the same type, but lists have a dynamic size and with different data type you can use. For example, in the object-oriented programming, we will teach you that you can use, for example, an object, you can use a class, everything that you can use with a list. Let's summarize this episode. If this video helped you to understand array and list in C#, thumbs up and subscribe the channel for more C# and programming tutorial. Goodbye.